here we've built a couple of DAOs and models and whatnot that allows us to interact with a database programmatically. And but the way we've interacted with it it was in a very static way, right? That we're hard coding these values that we're passing to insert and update or delete and whatnot. Really, this would have to be part of some interface that somebody could interact with this dynamically. So this needs to be made available somehow to some human being, right, to be able to interact with it. One way to make it available is to expose the data model through what are called web services. Right? So web services was an idea that has been around for quite a while. That basically looks to abstract some resource, whatever that resource is, and allows us to access it in a fashion that we can manipulate it without knowing the details of how that resource is lives or its life cycle and whatnot, right? That we would be provided with a high level API, right? That would allow us to do all the CRUD operations, right? But we don't know what the details are happening behind the scenes, right? Just like DAO is providing some kind of level of abstraction, that underneath it's using MySQL and then it's using JDBC and it's using all these SQL commands, right? It's providing us with a nice interface, yes, that abstract all of that. And I only need to know what the commands are, right? And I don't have to care that underneath there's SQL commands and whatnot. Yes. So we want to create an even higher level of abstraction that would make the accessible this resource, the movie resources, right? Make them available to the world, right? So web services, in the turn of the century, we were looking to, when the internet boom was just starting, we were looking to integrate a lot of very disparate systems throughout the world, and we were looking to say, well, how is it that we can best integrate these systems? And the answer kept being, well, what if you wrap it around some kind of service, right? That we can standardize the protocol that we can communicate with it. And that would be then converted into whatever idiosyncrasies the web service used, right? And back then, XML was really popular. HTTP was very popular. It was very very easy to open up an HTTP server. There was just tons of HTTP servers out there. Port 80, nobody really cared about port 80. So it was very easy to just pass data across this open data highway, right? You didn't have to go through the admin to open up a port for you to start passing some proprietary, binary data. There was this port already open that nobody cared about, right? So all this just opened up tons of capabilities of just sharing data across this. If you could only convert it into ASCII format, right, to just pass this to use this protocol, and a lot of the vendors, Oracle and Sun Microsystems and BEA and a lot of these folks were IBM, were competing on who could create a web service the fastest, right? And just give me a data model, maybe a movie data model, and you click a button and it generates this nice endpoint, this web service endpoint. And it made it available at this HTTP endpoint, and anybody in the world could hit it and retrieve all your movies and there was a lot of hope that this would make it easy for companies and organizations to collaborate amongst each other. Right? The idea was that I could my phone says I want to go to Chicago and automatically query airlines, a whole bunch of airlines, right? A whole bunch of rental cars, a whole bunch of hotels, and hopefully the idea would be that all their services would be standardized, and one query could be sent over to many rental cars and airlines and hotels, and they would all be able to respond with the same schema, right? And then I could crunch that number, and then give you, oh, here, depending on your hour, where you're going, blah blah blah, this is the best option. That's the way it was being sold to us. It turned out that it was much more harder than we thought, integrating systems, because airlines, they all represent their own data models, have completely different schemas, they have all different infrastructures, and same with rental cars and hotels. It was very hard to have everybody fit into a particular way. But anyway, the idea of the web service survived, even though it failed miserably when we tried to use them to integrate all these systems. We underestimated the difficulties of integrating disparate systems. Nevertheless, the idea of the web service survived till this day. And today, I think it's living up to that expectations, that original expectations. Today you have these websites, Orbitz and Airbnb and all these that are able to hit all these services, right, and then aggregate all these data and then give you kind of like a summary of all this. So certainly we would like to be able to do is kind of how to do that. How do you have these web services that allow you to expose this data, right, to other folks that can use them. So we're going to be doing that. First, we'll do it so that we can add a user interface, right? So that we can interact with our own server. But certainly, this same web service can be used by anybody, right? Anybody who knows our web service endpoint can come and query our list of movies and whatnot, right? And that's how IMDb does it, and OMDB, and right, they make their data available, right, at a particular endpoint, and you can just query it and it just returns some data, right? So in particular, this is just one of them, right? Here's a open API, right? Open movie database API, right? And that's their API. That you hit it with certain parameters, and it comes back. It hits their database. They query it. They format it in this particular way, and then we can build a user interface against this, right? They have their own user interface, right? But they use the same API that we would use, right? So first we need to know, how do you expose this data? What did they do to expose this data, right? And it's actually very simple. Already, I think for one of your assignments, one of the project assignments, you exposed a couple of things, right? I think wasn't there a select all that exposed a whole bunch of hello messages? So we could do something similar, right? Here, we could create here for the movies. We could create here a class and create our own service. So service, and create our own movie service, movie service. That could expose, it could use that DAO, the DAO that we've been using so far, to expose some data. For instance, we can convert this into a REST controller, right? And then provide here a function that would do something like public list movie, find all movies, and import this data. Import these data types, Java util and movie, and expose this data through the DAO. Now you could get a hold of the DAO, movie DAO, movie DAO, right? Get it the instance. There we go. We have the instance, and then we can say return DAO.find all movies. Okay. So what's the point? I mean, why not just use movie DAO? But this one is going to be exposed at a particular endpoint, right? We can say map the request that comes in, map the following URL, right, If the URL comes in as API movie, it's a quote, double quote. API/movie. Map it to this function, right? I want to be able to execute this function if this URL comes in through the server, right? And what's going to do? It's going to hit my movie DAO, right? It's going to find all the movies and it's going to return all the movies. So let's see if that works. If this doesn't explode. Okay. So if I go here and I go to my local host that's running at 8080 and I say API movie, right, it comes back with the 3 movies that we had in the database, right? So this is the browser hitting our local server, right? And then our server going out to the database, retrieving the data, right, and coming back. And this is the data that we had entered, right? Titanic, Avatar, and Blade Runner 2049, right? So this is similar to what OMDB API is doing, right? They have their own database, right? They have exposed this endpoint, right? And they have, we don't know what they actually implemented underneath, right? Whether you're using Java or .NET or PHP, but that's the point. We don't have to know, right? We don't care what they're using underneath, as long as we agree that we're going to use some particular syntax, right, for the endpoint. Right, and we're going to agree on the formatting of the data. This is using a very common data format, which is JSON, right, which has kind of been one of the more de facto standards on the web, right, how to encode data. Before JSON, XML used to be very, very popular, right? It was just plain old ASCII, and there were tons of XML parsers. You can do you can do very complex schemas. JSON is a little bit less powerful. It doesn't have as rich data types. It just has numbers, strings, Boolean, and numbers and arrays. That's it. Right? Whereas XML was much richer. But certainly JSON is easier to on the eye. Certainly it's easier to read. And so now it's exposed. Once this is exposed, this opens up, the world. You can do tons of things with this, right? Certainly, you can start creating all sorts of web clients, right, that can consume this, and query it anyway, and post data and retrieve data and whatnot, and that's what we're going to do in our next lecture, right? Now that we have it exposed, how can we interact with it? All right.